Watch Symposium. I'm Austin. All right, so here I am at a random mall in Tokyo, Japan, getting ready to see Frozen Part 2 with my daughters. And what do we have here? Time Station behind me. All right, so we've got a little bit of time. Let's stop in Time Station and see what they have. Do they have anything good? Anything worth getting? Let's see. All right, first thing, Zeppelin, made in Germany. And it looks like they're going for the aviation-esque angle, but perhaps they're going for the Zeppelin angle instead of airplanes. And you can see that's a quartz watch, and that's over 500 USD. So my guess is this is a watch that would absolutely tank in value if you were to put your money in it. Diesel, for the moody young man in your life. And you can see the catchphrase, only the brave, on the dial. And anytime you have a catchphrase on your watch is, well, probably not aimed at the seasoned horologist. These are big watches, clearly aimed for the younger person. Big watches are kind of popular among young people these days, and these are $300-$400 watches, so something that they could afford. And they're quartz watches, which, they're not really thinking about mechanical watches. They're more coming at it from a fashion angle with their teen angst. Diesel, for the gambling man, the risk taker. You can always use your diesel as a chip, $10 chip. And this line of diesel is a little bit more refined, going for a more mature customer, probably late 20s, not quite fully into horology, but it's a more tasteful aesthetic. No catchphrase on the dial. It's a more conservative case, more conservative and classic aesthetic, still a little bit on the big side. And, that's not a terrible looking watch at all, to be honest. All of these, of course, are still quartz. And if you like your lume, this could be an option. When I was a kid, I was more into Casios, but I imagine a lot of young people pass through the portal of something like a diesel. I know Nixon is another kind of popular big quartz, around the 400 USD range watch that you see young people wear. And I look at this as probably a stepping stone to something better in the future, perhaps something mechanical, maybe a lasting interest in watches. And I'm sure they'll look back and think, wow, what a crappy watch I had. But that's part of the game. Hopefully they'll move on to something decent, perhaps a starter mechanical watch and eventually an Omega, or if they get really sidetracked, something like this. And this is a mechanical watch. These are for 500 USD, and to many they perhaps look the part of a real decent watch. You got a couple of quartzes there, and this is just a textbook skitter right here, and you certainly don't want one of these in your watch box. Thank goodness for people like Archie that are preaching against this kind of garbage. And speaking of starter mechanicals, we love our Seiko 5s, and check this out. This seems to be a collaboration between Seiko 5 and JoJo. No clue what that is. And we've got 4 of the 8 here. And clearly each character has their own designated Seiko 5 model. And a little pricey, if you ask me. But these are limited editions, and they're making 1,000 pieces of each, so I'm sure some people will think they're collectible and pick up one or perhaps all. And not sure how functional these bezels are. I'm sure they rotate. In fact, of the bunch, this seems to be the most functional of the bezels with the timing indicator on it. What I love about this watch, check out the rehod. Actually, each minute marker has its own numeral. That's kind of cool. For the price, I think these should come with a metal bracelet, or at least an extra metal bracelet as an option to change between. Of the 4, this is probably my least favorite. It looks hard to read the time on this watch, and while the bezel rotates, it's essentially useless because there are no distinctive markings. You couldn't mark the time or time anything. But that's probably not why you get these watches. You get them because they're your favorite JoJo character's signature watch, and perhaps you think they're going to be collectible in the future. I actually like the dial on this one. It looks somewhat 3D, like those diamond indices as well. And more standard Seiko 5 fare. This is what I would go for if I was going the Seiko 5 route. More traditional dive watch look. And, these are the re-released Seiko 5s. Came out several months ago, and they're hackable. You can wind them now, And that looks like, I guess, the modern version of an SKX 009 Pepsi. And they come in different dial styles, dial colors, bezel colors, bracelet options. You've got some shark mesh bracelet right there. I can't tell, is that faux patina? Perhaps, perhaps not. Not quite sure that I like the minute markers being on the rehot, but that's just a new thing with these new Seiko 5s. And yeah, just more of a traditional dive watch look. Still have the blue Saturday and the red Sunday. You know, if you're just getting into mechanical watches, these are a decent option. I've always thought that going sub $200 is a better option when you're just starting to dabble in mechanical watches and maybe figuring out if you like mechanical watches or not. These are a little bit more expensive, but like I said, you can hack the second hand, you can wind them, and you know, it's a different aesthetic. I've got to say that I prefer the earlier Seiko 5 dive watch aesthetic, like the SKX 009. I think that's a beautiful watch. These have more of a modern look, a trendier look. They're clearly going for a younger demographic. You can see that through the marketing as well, and the way they label these watches, and the way they redesign the logo. Aesthetically, I always preferred the previous SKXs. I always thought the SKX 009 Pepsi on a Jubilee bracelet was a beautiful watch. I was kind of surprised I never got one, but with the Orient Blue Mako that I have, I don't think I'd get any use out of it. But it's good that they improve the movement and the functionality of the watch. And yeah, that's a good looking blue watch right there. And hey, if you can't get that Hulk, then the one on the left could perhaps satisfy. And if you're into the warmth of gold, then the Seiko 5 could fit the bill for a future Rolex Bluesy owner. So I contemplated cutting this footage because I didn't know if I'd be able to say anything really positive about these watches, but Wired is a brand, they do exist, and there is a connection between them and Seiko. These watches are produced under the umbrella of the giant corporation that is Seiko, and I'm assuming they've got a lot of that Seiko technology inside. They seem to be cheaper than a typical Seiko watch. They offer different color variations, and they're reasonably attractive. They come in quartz, there's solar options. I'm assuming dead on accurate. And if you step back and you look at something like that solar watch right there that will run indefinitely and accurately so, well, you know, having something on your wrist like this 100 years ago would make you a timing god. And the fact that we've come so far in terms of horology is pretty amazing. And so while this might not appeal to the mechanical minded watch lover, you got to give Seiko kudos for making watches like this happen. And Orient Star, which is also connected to Seiko. All right, so there's Seiko Group, which is a massive group consisting of three independent companies: Seiko Holdings, Seiko Instruments, and Seiko Epson. And when you think of your typical Seiko watch, well, that would be a subsidiary of Seiko Holdings. Now, the other two, Seiko Instruments and Seiko Epson, also exist, and under the umbrella of Seiko Epson is the Orient line. And so while Orient and, say, the Presage line are competitors under the umbrella of two completely different companies, they both fall under the umbrella of the Seiko Group. So it's kind of there's a weird connection, yet independence. They're competitors, yet, you know, they're part of the same group. It's weird, but I guess it works. Now, as far as these watches go, there's a lot to look at visually. I mean, you've got the open heart, you've got the seconds on a subdial, a power meter. Not for the minimalist. There's certainly a lot to see here in this dial. A little too busy for me, but I tell you, I mean, it is an entertaining dial. And this is a watch worth a mention. I mean, if you love dive watches, what do you think of this? This is basically a dive watch, or a dive looking watch with an open heart. It's not a cheap watch. This is 1,000 USD. And I tried it on. It's got sort of a zippy wind. And for 1,000 USD, the bezel play was pretty appalling. My sub $200 Orient Blue Mako has better bezel action than that. Water resistant to, I think, 200 meters. It looks the part of a dive watch, but it really isn't. I don't know what to make of those round minute and hour hands. Odd, to say the least. a high-end Casio watch, and this is a 2,200 USD watch. Bluetooth enabled, solar powered, dead on. I mean, our forefathers would be astounded at this level of horology that we've achieved. And I'm kind of surprised these watches don't appeal to me in some capacity, but they sort of leave me cold, and maybe they're just a little too perfect. They don't have the idiosyncrasies and the sort of personality that mechanical watches do. Now, that's a limited edition, very interesting dialed watch, and you can see to the left the connection between that and what is it? Space Fires? I don't want to know what the it is. You see what these non-mechanical watches do to me? All right, well, it's a couple $100 more than the other ones, and I think that iridescent dial is probably worth it. Oh, the Space Brothers. All right, look at those second hands, all totally aligned. You got to respect that. All right, so we've hit the home stretch and onto the best things in the shop. And we've got here a Seiko mechanical open heart Presage. And look, that's a beautiful watch. And I have nothing against the Presage line. It's just that I think they're a little too expensive. I'm one of those guys that will go Seiko 5 or GS, really nothing in between. That's sort of my watch philosophy, because if you're attracted to this watch, I think probably what you really want deep down is a GS, a Grand Seiko. And so you got to ask yourself, is this watch going to satisfy you? And personally speaking, I don't think it would me. So would you not be better just holding off on a mid-tier piece like this and just holding on to the money and just using it in the future towards something you really like, something really good like an Omega or a Rolex or the Grand Seiko? But then again, if you like the look of these and they check off all the boxes and you really just don't want to spend any more than what these cost, then these could be a viable option. Looking at these watches from the perspective of, a high-end watch lover, it's easy to dismiss them. But for a lot of the general public out there, the idea of spending over $500 on a watch is crazy. I mean, the idea of a $500 watch is like a really high-end watch for a lot of people. I know if you've been in this hobby for a long time, that's sort of like, almost seems like an impulse buy. And it goes to show how skewed our perceptions of watch prices can be and maybe become. But yeah, that's a beautiful one right there. Not quite the same as the one in the picture. The one in the picture looks a little bit different. I like the one in the picture more, but nice color scheme. I like how everything's silver, but you got the gold hour and minute leaf hands and nice thin Roman numerals. Very classy. So for some people, this could be the best of both worlds. You have the analog part and then the digital part. For me, I'm sort of either analog or digital. I don't really like the mixture of the two, but saves you from having to choose. That's a heck of an hour hand. It's a automatic diver there. Beautiful blue dial. Beautiful sunburst blue dial. Yeah, I like that a lot. Looks sort of like a turquoise color. Not sure how I feel about the hour and minute hands. Second hand is okay, but I think that's the hands on that are a little bit better, a little more to my liking. Solar powered diver. In regards to a Prospex watch, not too bad of a price. Now, what's odd about this, check out the indices. The indices are sort of connected with that blue ring. Right, another solar diver. Don't like the color scheme there as much. I like the Pepsi version a little bit more. And then this has a rotating bezel, but it's digital. And so I think you can use those digital minute markers with the bezel. And if so, that's kind of cool. And the very best thing in the shop, Grand Seiko. a 9F quartz Grand Seiko black dial. If you're looking for something standard, conservative, this is a great option, but I think if I were going to get a Grand Seiko quartz, I'd want one with GMT function. Why not? I guess if you want that conservative look, that's why not. Not crazy about the color, but that's a beautiful sunburst dial. Look at the way the light plays on that dial. Actually, I got to be honest, I think I would rather look at that dial than a standard black one. If I were choosing a watch for a non-watch person, I think I would go with a Grand Seiko 9F quartz. And you got the spring drive right there. My biggest gripe about spring drive watches is they're just a little too big. I think if they were 2 millimeters smaller, I think that would be perfect. I don't know why they're so big. I mean, I feel like they could get that technology in a smaller case, and I'm kind of surprised they don't try. An interesting textured dial right there. Too symmetrical for me. Give me the snowflake. Couple of automatics in the back. Now, that's the case size that I like. So if the spring drive was able to be fitted into that case, I think that would be much better. Now, it's not surprising a shop like this would have just a few automatics, but mostly spring drives and mostly quartz watches, because I think the people that buy watches from a shop like this probably are going to be buying quartz. Probably not going to be into the idiosyncrasies of mechanical watches. All right, there you go. So a random shop in a random mall in a random part of Japan, and better watches than I thought I would find. I thought I would come across a lot of fashion watches, but they had some relatively decent things there. Some Grand Seikos and some Seiko dive watches. The JoJo limited edition Seikos were kind of interesting. Those are watches you won't find in the States probably. And Orient Star dive watch, kind of interesting. Nothing I think I would go for. You know, by far the best thing was the collection of Grand Seikos that they had. But, you know, to see Grand Seiko at that store was sort of a downer, you know. Some of the majesty sort of rubbed off a little bit, seeing them in such a, I don't know, regular atmosphere. You know, that's one of the reasons why, you know, Patek and Omega and Rolex really are careful about where their watches are sold, because, you know, when they are sold amongst crappy fashion watches, it's not a good look. And yeah, it wasn't a really good look, I think, for those Grand Seikos to be among some of those really, well, there's, to be honest. But, you know, I do like Grand Seiko. Would I pay the money for one? Not really. I mean, seeing them in that shop really demonstrates that they just don't have the exclusivity of a Rolex, and they really lack the punch. But, of course, nice watches. Worth thousands upon thousands? Probably not. But anyway, let me know what you like. Take care. Thanks for watching. See you next time.